Since I returned to writing in earnest about 3 years ago, I've written probably a couple of hundred pieces. And there's one in particular that seemed to have struck a note. It was published in the Watershed Journal in a winter edition 2 years ago, coming up on 2 years ago, and got a lot of comments then. And recently, about a month ago, a woman asked me when I gave my name, if I was the guy who had written Lillian McDougal. I had, and this is the piece. The snowplow operator, clearing the convenience store parking lot after the blizzard, found her body standing upright, like a shriveled blue-gray popsicle, wearing only a house dress and slippers, her right hand frozen solid to the 6-foot post. He was relieved to know that the medical examiner determined that she had not asphyxiated, which could have meant he had inadvertently plowed her under during the storm as he worked to keep the lot clear and the store open. She had frozen to death peacefully, one likes to assume. The obituary identified her as Lillian McDougal, the former Lillian Lambert, Thomas Jefferson High School class of 1949, preceded in death by Michael McDougal. Mike survived being an infantry grunt in Korea to wear the white uniform and royal blue cap of Bluebird Dairy. He cut a fine and friendly figure driving his truck, delivering glass bottles of milk to boxes that sat on every back porch in town before dairy conglomerates and plastic bottles came and Bluebird flew away. The obit caught the eye of a woman at the newspaper, the address especially, 217 Cottage Street. She remembered taking numerous phone calls from Lillian, numerous but always the same theme. Where's my newspaper? Lillian was polite but persistent, asking if the boy was late or maybe he threw it in the bushes or maybe there was a sub that morning. The woman tried as best she could to tell Lillian there was no errant paper boy, not anymore, that the paper was now published digitally, that Lillian could go online to subscribe, that then there would always be there for her. Lillian listened, seemed to understand. In fact, she said she understood, then thanked her, saying, well, maybe he'll be on time tomorrow morning. Lillian didn't have a computer, no desktop, no laptop, no cell phone. Her son Danny's oldest girl, Morgan, tried to teach her once how neat it was to go online, maybe even connect with old friends. Lillian said it confused her, made her nervous, all that clicking and the screen jumping around. Danny tried to convince her to use the jitterbug phone he bought her, at least for emergencies. The argument that ensued after he tried to get her to wear a life alert device around her neck was the most heated they had had since her decision not to move into an apartment and out of the house that Mike had bought her. Lillian did finally take the jitterbug. She kept it unused forever in her sewing drawer. Perhaps Lillian's aversion to a newfangled phone was born out of her loyalty to her former co-workers and tinged by resentment at her former employer, who now she understood profited from modern technology. For over 30 years, Lillian had been one of Ma Bell's girls, a telephone switchboard operator. She still had her service pin. And she'd been a darn good operator, had been promoted from the local city exchanges, those were easy, plug, unplug procedures, to the long distance board. How she delighted in was so proud of her ability to connect a family right here in town with an aunt or uncle or cousin down south, setting up the switchovers, hearing the operators' voices, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, becoming more and more Dixie. It was that ability that kept her on the job longer than any of her friends at Bell. She stayed at the switchboard until the day they pulled the plug and automated. Neighbors had told Danny when he came over to visit to check on his mother that they sometimes saw her outside early in the morning, even when the weather was bad, searching around her house, in the bushes, even under the house, confused, looking for something. But after a few minutes, they said she'd go back inside, and that was that. Danny didn't bring it up to her, especially because it was reported to him by the neighbors. Lillian wanted nothing to do with her new neighbors, not the Asian couple who she said cooked their stinky food that you could smell all over Kingdom Come, certainly not the two gay men who she avoided lest she acknowledge their sin. And Lillian didn't like hearing about how forgetful she'd become. The most she would say was, "I know I forget things. At least I remember that I forget things," and laugh at her own joke. What could have happened to Lillian that morning of the blizzard, of 40-mile-an-hour winds, of below zero temperatures, of snow depths up to 3 feet and drifts deeper than that? All that anyone could surmise is that, like so many other mornings, she went outside to get her newspaper. That before she could get back into the house, the force of the wind slammed her front door shut and locked. There she was, barely clothed, shivering already. What could she do? Of course, she wouldn't knock on her neighbors' doors and give them the satisfaction. All of her old neighbors had passed or moved out. Grace across the street, they were in PTA together, the card club. She was the last to leave. Her daughter put her in Sunnyvale. Lillian must have figured she could walk the block and a half to the convenience store. The street at least was plowed. She could walk in it, and she knew she could get help there. Whatever prints her slippers made in the street were long covered by repeated plowings. But she did make it to the convenience store to get help. She made it to the metal post on the rim of the convenience store parking lot. That's where, after the snow was plowed away, they found her standing upright, like a shriveled blue-gray popsicle, her right hand frozen solid to the 6-foot post. The post that, until they removed it a month ago, had held a public payphone, the last one in town. That's Lillian McDougal. Thank you.